What is up, my friend? Hey, welcome to the Grow Your Video Business show. This is the show for videographers and studio owners who want to learn how to get paid what they're worth, run a smarter business, and live a better life. My name is Ryan Coral from Studio Sherpas, and I am your host. In today's episode, I interview video business owner Wesley Dean, and the big things that we talk about today are buying gear, how to know if it's the best decision right now. I know. We all want the gear and we think it can solve all of our problems, but there might be a better way. We also talk about how a mentor can make all the difference in your video business. We talk about the importance of giving yourself constraints on projects and also the difference of selling to a warm audience versus a cold audience. But before we get into all of that, I wanted to mention something that I've created to help you avoid one of the biggest mistakes that we make in the sales process when talking with new clients. I'm hosting a free workshop that is going to help you stop leaving money on the table and give you more confidence on sales calls or Zoom calls, which will lead to more bookings and at the kind of budgets that you're looking for. You can get access to the workshop at the link below or visit studiosherpas.com/budget. All right, let's hear a quick word from our sponsor, Core Group, and then we will get into the show. If there was one thing that could have ended my business 17 years ago, it would be because of the numbers. I hate accounting, taxes, W-9s, W-2s, WD-40s, spreadsheets, all of that stuff. And I hate it mostly because I'm afraid of it. I'm just not great with numbers. If this sounds familiar, or if you're so new in your business that it's not even on your radar yet, you need Core Group. Core Group can help you create financial systems and tax strategies that you need so you can grow profitably, and they've been doing this for over 20 years. They become an extension of your team so that you can stay in your lane of expertise and then lean on them to help guide you along the way. For me, having a team of experts in my corner to help keep track of our books and just to make sure that we're budgeting for taxes appropriately, to have an actual strategy for our taxes and our accounting is priceless. And it allows me to sleep easier at night, knowing that I don't have to be an expert in that arena. If you want to avoid surprises in your video business, and you want experienced help building a plan for the future that you want, both professionally and personally, head over to studiosherpas.com/core for more information. And when you're ready to set up a free consult with them, make sure to mention Studio Sherpas for a special discount too. Got your back. Get more out of your accountant. Go to studiosherpas.com/core. All right, friends. Hey, I'm so glad that you are here for this special edition of the Grow Your Video Business podcast with my friend Wesley Dean, who is from Intermotion Media. I will not talk like a robot the entire episode, but welcome to the show, Wesley.
Dude, I am so excited to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
We were talking right before we started recording. I just had assumed that Wesley was on a previous episode of the podcast because we've been talking. We've done coaching calls together. I was on his podcast, but apparently I was wrong, and he has not been on this show before. So it's been a long time coming. I probably would have asked you a long time ago, but I assumed that we already had an episode in the books.
No, well, it was a great time, and glad to be on.
Well, talk a little bit about like what is the work of Intermotion Media? Like, how do you fit into the world of Studio Sherpas? What would you say you do here?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like all people in the Studio Sherpas world, we produce videos, but how do we get there is a little bit more of a backstory. So I actually studied international relations and development in undergrad, but always loved, I started off in photography, but loved video, loved filming. I started off because it was an excuse to work in the AV world, because it seemed like, well, my options were I could clean toilets, I could work as a chef at school, be a lifeguard. Nothing wrong with all those. I've done a lot of those things myself, but it just seemed like filming and video was more interesting to me for my personality and skill set. And I wasn't sure exactly how those two things were going to come together, like the video space. I kind of kept pursuing both. But then when it was about time I was graduating, I realized that people would start paying me to film. And I actually had a nonprofit in the Buffalo area who had seen some of the work I had done, and then they offered to pay me. I thought this was like amazing. It's like, wait, people actually want to pay me to do video? Like, how amazing is that? And so I really just jumped in to it, with not much of a background, but just said, hey, I'm going to pursue a video career. And I know, I think at first my parents were a little bit, hesitant, like, oh, shouldn't you like be looking for a job? But at the same time, I was obviously much younger then, very few responsibilities. So I think they kind of let me just run with it. And so, we're still doing this 10 years later. And so run Intermotion Media, now based out of Alexandria, Virginia. And we do a lot of online coursework it's kind of like peace building, conflict analysis space, but also do a lot with nonprofits in the development work. So they can be all over the world, whether it's Sierra Leone and West Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, Cambodia and the Philippines, and also a lot in South America. And also do a mixture of work for churches, schools, and kind of a wide range in that area, but staying kind of focused in that nonprofit space is just what I've really resonated with the most.
I love it. What's out of the kinds of work that you get to do, the kinds of project that you've worked on, like what gets you most excited?
So I'd say, I think definitely some of the travel aspect gets me the most excited. And so I had a trip, just here back in December where I thought I was done traveling for the year. So I had a great bookend trip to Israel early on in the year, back in, I think, February. And then I just thought I was done traveling for the rest of 2020 just because of the pandemic. And I had a really quick trip come up that involved documenting a relief project in the island of Providencia in Colombia that got just slammed by Hurricane Iota. It had 196 mile an hour winds. It happened around the election, so I don't think very many people heard about it.
Oh, wow.
Just there's a lot going on, but they just got slammed. Fortunately, there weren't that many people that actually passed away. About I think 5 was the total, but just infrastructure. 98% of the infrastructure was damaged, and they had some water issues. And so they ended up taking down a solar powered desalinization plant, and the organization wanted me to film and help kind of set that process up. I was also the only one on the team that spoke Spanish. And so, we went down. It was about a 4-day delay getting down there, where initially they promised me, a private plane is going to take you guys down. And then the Colombian government, there's a delay with customs. And so they're like, oh, no, well, sorry, it's not going to be Sunday, but we'll get you on a flight. And then they realized that, I guess because it's Central America, it's a lot harder to get a flight down there. Like there's a lot of private planes that will volunteer for places like the Bahamas or areas where you can go in a small plane and be fine. But this one was just for enough that no one wanted to do that. And so slowly we're delayed, and they're like, oh, well, we have a pilot who's gonna take you. And then they realized, oh, actually, we just found out his passport expired. So he can't take you guys there. And we're like, oh, what? Come on. And so we're in Tampa getting ready to go. And then they realize, okay, well, we found a private company that's going to take your gear. Like all this like water equipment there, it's going to fly it. So we're like, oh, okay, that's good. But then they called back and said, oh, but you have to go to Miami. You have to take all your stuff to Miami, 4 hours away to Miami. And so we loaded everything up on the truck, drove 4 hours to Miami to get it so it was ready to go. And then they finally just were like, well, we're going to put you on commercial flights to get there to the island in Colombia and San Andres. And then from there, you'll catch a military aircraft into Providencia. And so that's what we did. We finally made it there 4 days later to an area that was, had just been really devastated by 196 mile an hour winds. But I was able to do the work of documenting that. So they want to be able to film, obviously show the relief work. So that way, when they're working with other countries, other governments, they can show them, hey, yeah, we actually know what we're doing. And they'll be like taken as legitimate, but also for fundraising efforts. And so while we were there, we got the whole thing set up, and the president of Colombia and his whole entourage came and tried this water that had been like desalinized from with the ability of the sun. So that was, and I got to film with the Colombian Navy. Oh. So getting to film with those guys. I'd had some issues with my drone. I was close to an airport and it was in the no-fly zone. And so I'm in the DC area. So I just give up on drones pretty much because
right.
It's just so restricted that, I have to travel an hour away from my house before I can do anything. So I tried, it was like out of luck. And then a guy taps me on the shoulder, like, hey, look at that. I step out and there's a drone like straight overhead. I'm like, who is this guy?
Sent from the heavens above.
I know, from the heavens above. And they're like, oh, it's that guy over there. And so I got to work with he's the I think the Navy's like PR social media guy. And we just had fun. Like I gave him a few tips on the drone. They gave me the shots, thankfully, so I could pass them off to the client. And we just had fun connecting over the fact that, even though we had a lot of differences, we were like the media guys on the team. And so we had this instant bond. We were the video guys, had this instant bond. And so it's trips like those that I think I just love the opportunity they make for great stories. Yeah. But at the same time, I have a wife and 3 kids and I want to stay married. So those trips have to be like far and few between. But they do definitely make life memorable for sure.
That's awesome. I like that little comment. I do want to stay married. So in order to do that,
I've kind of realized that I, can't keep doing that, and eventually need to be able to send other people, and I have been able to do that, and it's been one of my kind of joys to be able to see when you can send other people on trips and manage the process, and how oftentimes it'll turn out better when you focus on that pre-production, the planning, the shot list, the triangulating all of your data in a story. Because I have unfortunately had trips where you go on a trip and someone promises you a certain story and you get there and you realize like, ooh, it's they kind of sugar coated things a little bit, and you're like, trying to salvage the story just because there were layers, there was distance, they wanted to appear good, and but usually you can kind of figure some of that stuff out when that like when you're not going, when I'm not going on a trip. I'm going to make sure I'm not going to trust somebody else to wing it like I would, and so. There were a few times where I recommended somebody, but I wasn't involved in the pre-production. They went on a trip and it was okay, but it wasn't exactly as good as it would have been had I done more of that pre-production work beforehand.
Dude, 10 years running a business. I'm sure you've learned a lot of lessons. What would you say? What's one of the things that you're proudest of overcoming, learning, adapting to from whatever?
Oh man, so many. I think it's definitely been a bit of a roller coaster for me where, sometimes you have great stages where things are going well, like the right people fall into your lap. And I definitely had that early on where I had some great people where it was kind of word of mouth. It was referral. And things were like going great, like business was growing, the right people were coming on. But then I had a person who I hired too quickly. And, I had our second baby on the way and I just wanted to get somebody in the door, get them quickly. I hired them. But it didn't really work out as well as I had hoped, and I had to let him go like 6 months later. But I call that my $18,000 mistake because I didn't. I realized after that process, it set this whole cascade for learning. Like, how do you actually hire? How do you actually go through the process of vetting people? How long should your hiring process take to find people? And what is that whole process going through? And so as a result of going through that, I've realized, I've learned quite a bit, and that's where I think it's been for me a process of thinking, oh, I got this, I can do this. Let's grow and expand, and then you kind of hit a bump or your plane climbs too quickly and it stalls a little bit and you kind of go into a nose dive and then now we're at the stage where definitely pulled out of it, but I think it's been a process of realizing how do you manage a team and being willing to understand where you want to fit in with your business and what does success look for your business, because I think at times success, sometimes we always equate it to, like higher revenue and I'm going to get more stuff and get more complicated, like get all these things and that equals success. But at the same time, what I've realized that it's more of like focus on yourself, focus on, making sure you're profitable and taking care of yourself as a business owner. And I know, someone like Mike Michalowicz, Profit First. I know I'm not sure, you might have introduced me to them. I'm not sure if it was you or Donald Miller, but
it was probably me. I mean,
I think it was you who introduced me to him. And I've, definitely checked his stuff out, read his books. And, at one point I was reading one of them when I think I was trying to really grow my business really big. And he had a line that it's easier to make it dig a well than it is to make it rain. And that just kind of stuck through where it's like, it's easier to get rid of expenses you don't need than to have to make all these other sales. And then for me, I went through the process of saying, well, what do I actually not need in my business that would make things easier? Because at one point I was in a mode where hey, yeah, we need a new light, we need a new drone because someone crashed it. Like, yeah, let's just put it on the credit card because, that's going to grow the business, having all this stuff. And then afterwards, you kind of realize that, no, actually having all these expenses and stuff like that doesn't automatically mean you have more money. In some ways, it just means that you have less money when they're not actually appropriate. So I think that's the one thing I've realized is that make sure all your investments are actually going to bring a return and take care of yourself in the process. Because there were times when I would hardly pay myself because I was telling myself, hey, this is going to bring a return like 3-4 years down the road. And then you realize 3-4 years down the road when employees are like traveling the world because they paid off all their student debt and don't have any expenses. And then you're like, wait, why am I the one not traveling the world?
Because you didn't pay yourself.
Yeah, I didn't pay myself enough. And so I think that's the biggest thing is that, realize like take care of yourself, make sure you're paying yourself first versus assuming that, buying the latest camera or having a big studio is going to automatically lead to more work. I mean, I will say that the first time I hired an employee, though, who was a really great editor, it just increased the capacity to do work. And so I think that's where like having the right people on your team makes just this huge difference for being able to grow things. And, the wrong people will just cost you money, but the right people will just, they'll bring a huge return. So make sure you get the right people in your boat to begin with.
I think that's really good advice. I wish I would ask myself that question every time we go to purchase something new. We definitely do a good job of, especially now, we've gotten rid of so many unnecessary expenses in our business. Tyler, our operations guy, has gone through our credit card statements, our bank statements, like tediously, and keeps like, bringing stuff up. Hey, do we actually need this thing? Are we using this thing? Are we getting, money out of this thing? Is this a good investment? So, our expenses today are way less than they were, before. But, I've had that mind frame of like, hey, this, if we don't have a drone, we can't get hired to do drone work. So then the question is like, okay, so if you're contemplating, adding 360 or adding drone or, doing 8K, that stuff can be fine. But how many times have you been asked for it? How much are you going to be able to charge for it? How many times do you think you're actually going to do it over the course of the next year? Is it exciting? Do you feel like it's going to bring life to you and your team? Does it help with the work that you're doing? Like those are questions that you really should be asking yourself, especially if it's a piece of equipment that you can't afford and you are going to put it on a credit card. How long is it going to take before you can pay it off? Are you going to be paying interest on it? Is it something that you can rent out, right, to help offset some of those costs? Those are questions that, if we were in a bigger city, we probably would own like an Alexa or a Red or something because we would know that it would probably pay for itself by just renting it out and we'd have access to it if we wanted it. But then the question for me, if it never got rented out, is that camera what it's going to provide for us, from a visual standpoint, from the efficiency of setting it up and tearing it down? Is that going to eat into our profit margin, or is it going to help? Is it going to increase? Are we going to get hired by companies that wouldn't hire us before because they're telling us, hey, you need to have an Alexa or we can't hire you for this job? So that's a challenging question because I think a lot of us convince ourselves like, oh, I've got to have the Alexa because then my confidence will grow and then we'll be able to get the really big jobs. Well, there's a lot of different things you can do to help your confidence that's not going to cost, $60,000. So, hey, hire me. I'll build your confidence for $50,000, save you $10,000, and then you can. Okay,
there you go.
Maybe not.
No, but it's totally true. And I have a friend who he bought the Canon like C500 Mark II. I think it was. Is it Mark II? The C500 top line. But I think he bought it like February of last year. So he bought it February of last year, and then it just sat on his shelf for pretty much the entire year as everything went to Zoom. And he was now filming everything on Zoom, but that was just what life was like. And so I think there are a lot of options. Rent it several times before you have to buy it. And I think the thing too is that it is a lot of work growing a business, reaching out, but it's really easy to buy things and put them on our credit card and tell us it will eventually bring a return. But that's it. I mean, some cases it might, but not necessarily. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I would have told myself is like, all right, how do you think twice, like hold off as long as you possibly can on your purchases until you absolutely need to. Or even with bringing somebody else on, like hire them as a contractor first, as an editor, see if you like their work. And then if you do and you're willing to pay them, make an offer. But especially in our world, it's perfectly acceptable to hire someone as a contractor first. And then if you think they're a good fit, then maybe bring them on later. But don't feel like you have to hire someone on as a full-time employee or anything in that space right away.
Yeah, I love that.
Because there definitely have been times where, like, even my bad hire, where if I had just said, hey, let me wait a little bit, even like let me wait 1 or 2 weeks, and I like how they pointed, just like, hey, let someone else get crazy because they're already jump to the next thing, but just feel free to wait, give it time, and when you give things time, like I think a lot of clarity happens as a result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the challenges for solopreneurs, like people that are just that don't have employees, I think it's easy to watch some YouTube videos and be like, I need to get that. That will help my business. So my encouragement to you, if that's you, or if you just feel like the people on your team, they're not the kind of people that are going to tell you, they would never tell you no. If you have people like that whatever, that's good, bad, whatever. Use something like the Studio Sherpas community, the grow your video business Facebook group, and just throw it out there and say, hey, I'm thinking about purchasing the new Alexa or a drone or whatever. Is this a good decision? Is this a dumb decision? Like let people push back and invite people into that process, because if you're making big decisions on your own, that's hard. It's hard to do that, like without having other people that can speak into your business. I use the Facebook group as just a small, like that's an instant community. You can get instant answers and suggestions and ideas, and people might not know you or your business or whatever, but if you have people in your life that could actually, they're not afraid to say no, like just ask somebody like, hey, I'm thinking about, getting this, and let them ask you questions about like, well, why do you need that? Like, how is it going to help? Because you can ask yourself those questions, and I'm really good at convincing myself that I need the thing.
Reasons,
like whatever the thing is. Yep. I'm real good at sales. So
no, anyway. Absolutely. And because I think too, and I think that's one of the other thing I would advise my younger self would be like, get a mentor sooner who can help. Get that person who is naturally going to, when you say, hey, let's do this, who's naturally going to say, well, let's just like, wait a minute. And I also like it when you give yourself constraints, you can actually find more creative ways of doing things that don't necessarily cost as much when you actually stop, think about it, analyze the problem, and come up with ways of how you could potentially accomplish the same thing, just with less resources. And sometimes too, when you increase your expenses, you just kind of don't appropriately charge your client for the same amount. And I've had times where I want to ask a client, hey, would you like to rent this camera to have it in your shot, or is this important to you? And they say no. It's like, well, I saved myself that cost, but when you already have it in your overhead, then it just becomes I guess I'll charge my same rate, but you're not adjusting it appropriately for gear at times. Although I know some people will obviously itemize all their expenses.
I had somebody just yesterday that had direct messaged me and was asking about budget. He had purchased the Budget Maximizer, and he's like, I've got like all of my gear is already paid off, so like I wouldn't charge, why would I charge? I see this as a line item on here. Why would I charge anybody for my gear? And I'm like, yeah, that's a valid point, valid question, but where did that money come from? Like you paid for that gear. Did it come from your personal savings? Do you have a savings account for your business? And, depending on what the answer is there, like, well, what happens if your gear breaks, or what happens when it's time to upgrade your gear? Like, where is that money going to come from? So you have to like think about that. Like, yeah, you might already own the gear. Your client, you don't need to explain to them, break down your whole thing and say like, I actually, every project, 5% or 10% of our budget that I'm charging you is going right back into the business to like, reinvest in gear. Like nobody needs to know that, but that's probably just an expectation of like, oh, of course you've got all this amazing gear and that costs you something at some point in your life, maybe in the future. So you got to charge for that. So I wasn't that harsh when I was saying, but think about it
point,
in terms of, yeah, you might own it, but you still need to, you don't want to have to pay for it. The people that are hiring you, they should be paying you enough money that you can buy your gear. And that's where that's where, I don't know what the percentage is, like 95% of all businesses fail within the first 4 years or something like that. And it's because we don't plan ahead. We take the savings like, oh, I've got, $10,000 in the bank and I'm going to start this business. And then you spend $10,000 on gear and a studio space. And like, you've got the stuff, and then you're charging people, $1,000 to do a video job that should actually cost like $2,000 or $3,000 because you need to recoup that investment that you made originally. And then you need to start planning for the future. Okay. I'm done preaching. Maybe not.
No, it's exactly right. And I know I found, since you mentioned the budget maximizer, someone who did find a lot of value in that. That was really helpful for me too. Like looking over it and even being like, oh yeah, I probably should be charging more for the contractors, because I'm not just in the business of providing people jobs. Like I'm in the business of like being profitable and managing things. And even though I don't do as good a job as I always do with making sure I appropriately charge for that, but it's the same time, it is a great tool to kind of look through and think, what am I not doing or taking into account mentally that I should be doing?
Yeah, I love that. Well, Wesley, I know like in one of our coaching calls in the past, I think it was one of the very first calls that we had, you were wanting to niche down. You kind of were having, just some different thoughts on what you wanted to do. Talk a little bit about that process and how helpful was it for you to think through that? Because, I think that's such a hot topic. People are like, I know I need to niche down, but then like most people don't. And what for you, how was that conversation, not the conversation that we had, but the conversation that for you to just be thinking like, I think it would be valuable for me to niche down. Did you do it? And how are things different today because of your decision or your indecision? Ooh.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the sort of thing, niching down is like, it's so hard, I think, and it's been a journey for me. And I feel like I'm finally, over the last, 2 years, really kind of getting some of that clarity of what that looks like. And, I started off, just anyone who will pay me, like, sure, $500 for a wedding, that's great for me, and then I, quickly realized that weddings weren't my thing. But then there's always so many options. And I think, too, the hard part about niching down is that it requires you to look at the money that's currently on the table, and kind of say, all right, will this job, how will it look on a bio if at the end of the 10 years I want to accomplish, have like all of my projects lead somewhere. And so I think that for me has been a little bit helpful, is thinking through, all right, if I look at all this work over the last 10 years, what does it point to you being an expert in? And think through like all the different projects. And, I think part of it just requires trying things and seeing if it's gonna, like, how do you resonate with it at all? And so, at one point, randomly tried things. I heard on the radio from the Washington Police Department that they had a hard time finding people to redact their body cam videos. And so basically they need to like blur out all the faces of people who aren't supposed to be in it. And I thought, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. A great opportunity. So I like reached out to the police officer and was like, hey, yeah. And she at first was like, how can I help you? You look like you like make movies. It's like, well, it's the same skill set. And so we did end up landing some of those projects, but it was like a vortex. Like I knew I was going to drive all of my employees away because they were like frame by frame, making sure everyone's voices are like blurred out. They're like bleeping out any sensitive information. And at some point the lady was like, oh yeah, well, you could get sued by the lawyer depending on if you like don't do a good job. And I was like, oh, like, so that was one example where you just have to try stuff and realize like, what do you enjoy the most? What are you actually like better at? Then, because there's so many people out there who do video, who do it. Yeah. But for me, and so I also realized that, hey, I enjoy strategy and thinking through things. Because usually my conversations would happen is someone would come and say, hey, we need a video and this is the video we need. And then without actually taking time to articulate their goals, what they want to accomplish and through that process. And so pursued strategy and for a little while, part of my dream was like, I just want to do only strategy and no video and no production. But then I realized that, well, people actually do sometimes want a concrete deliverable attached to things. And while I do think at some point in the future I will be able to get to more of just a strategy, be able to do just that, it might take a little bit longer. But as I worked with things, I realized that the projects that I enjoyed the most and had the most experience were some that involved some level of international work or cross-cultural communication. So I had grown up in elementary and middle school in Colombia and South America. So I had some of that experience growing up overseas. My parents had worked with a church there. And so I realized that I had a lot more experience in those areas than other people. And two, when it came to, for me, it was when we were producing online coursework that we were then translating in other languages. And so what they were doing is like they would say, hey, well, we want this course to be in for Afghanistan, and because it's related to peace building, let's say. And so their whole approach is like, well, let's just translate the content and then like boom, like that'll be good. And then you realize that there's actually a lot of other things that you need to be doing in that space to communicate cross-culturally, like some words like disarmament, meaning where like you take down your weapons, and they don't even have a word for that in either Pashto or Dari, just because the whole concept is really foreign. And so I started to realize that process of communicating like across cultures was something I was really interested in. And I had a project last year where, I talked to someone about, hey, I want to be doing more like strategy in the space. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, kind of, and I had to deal with some clients where they just want you as an extension to be able to like knock content out. And honestly, some of the best paying clients have been in that regard where, hey, like they just want someone with a camera to film and edit, and they've got the strategy. And I had done that enough where I knew that I didn't want to keep doing that like year after year after year. But it was kind of hard transitioning out of that. But I knew that that's what I wanted to do was like be able to have some more of that space of strategy. And I told one of the clients that I'd wanted to do that, and they're like, okay. But then when they finally did come back to me for help was when they wanted to manage a project, filming another project in another country, because all of a sudden the person who was a communications director needed to be talking with in this case, it was like a videographer in Sierra Leone. They didn't speak the video language at all. They didn't understand, like, all right, frame rates and aspect ratios and, all that kind of stuff. But because there was that, they needed to communicate that internationally to somebody else, they realized, hey, let me talk to Wesley about that and his experience. And so that's when I think I realized is like, what do people actually come to you for that makes you really valuable? And, because I had a lot of failures where I explained what I was trying to do in terms of like, more strategy based and thinking through things. And I gave my pitch. And then honestly, it's been like maybe 2 years in the making of trying to like focus my strategy and niche down. And a lot of it has been, where you like your pitch and you're just like, oh yeah, of course people will get how amazing it is to have somebody like think through them. And then people kind of realize like, well, like I have a brain, like why am I paying you to like think for me? And honestly, it was really hard. But then kind of through the process realized like, you just have to be like exponentially better at one particular thing in order for people to actually want to involve you in on the strategy side of things. It's just been part of that process. And for me, I've realized it's that managing projects internationally, communicating. Those are the things that I just like come alive with, and that I do have a certain advantage of just because of all the experience I've had over the last 10 years.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's really, it's a powerful process to go through because the challenge with not niching down is that you're just like, you're making noise. You're vanilla. You're just you're blending in with everybody else, and you don't have to be like, I use the word, you mentioned the word. You don't have to be like, when we say expert, it's not like you have to know all of the things, right? But you have to know more than your client, and you have to know enough to be able to deliver on what it is that the client needs, wants, that what the expectations that you set, but you don't need to know all of the things. So there's some freedom in that. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, and so the approach that I have taken for finding the kind of niching down is I've almost looked at it as a Venn diagram, and so when you get those two concentric circles, and so you might list, hey, these are all the things in like the video space that I'm really good at, but then maybe pick one other topic, and so for some people it might be the beverage industry or like hospitality or story, or just pick something else, and then when you overlap them, say, all right, how can I be the best at these particular areas? And so in my case, it might be, there's no way I'm ever going to be the best camera operator, or like videographer, or anything like that. And I'm definitely not going to be the best person at working internationally, understanding like cross-cultural teams that are diverse, that are made up of people from different countries. But if we put those two together, that little circle in the middle where they overlap, that little or triangle or whatever shape it is, maybe I could actually be the best at that cross-cultural work and video. And when I put those together, there's a lot less people doing those specific things, because it is really hard to like take one circle and narrow it down in terms of clarity. But when you just take two separate circles or three, overlap them, it's not as hard all of a sudden, because you're playing in a much smaller field.
Right.
Because just pick, if you work in a different league, it's the huge ocean. It's hard to be the best at everything, but just pick a write your own rules to the game for whatever it is that you're trying to niche down on. And then all of a sudden there's a lot less people there.
Yeah, because you need to market yourself. And when you're reaching out to people, they want to know how you can help them. They want to know that you can speak their language. Oh, in this case, like actually speak their language, but like speak their brand language, that you understand what they're about. And if you're the way that you're niched down can speak directly to them, that's going to be way more impactful and helpful for that business. So when they're looking at you versus another company that's a more generic video company, we specialize in all of your video needs, versus we specialize in helping cross-cultural schools that need to create course material. Like, oh, well, okay, I'm looking at both companies, like this one sounds way more intriguing. So it just makes your when you go to market your website or little videos that you make to market, or when you post on social media, you can speak directly to your niche when you're like using the language that your niche uses or that resonates with. So we're winding down here, Wesley, but I'm just curious, like, what are you doing today? I mean, the landscape is totally different. Business looks very different, but how are you marketing yourself today? How are you selling what you're doing today?
Yeah, I mean,
and is it working? That's good.
Yeah. I mean, so thankfully, I had a number of clients I built up going into the pandemic. So before it, and so I had anytime you can really have those relationships, it's always easier to sell to a warm lead than to a completely cold lead, because there had been a lot that had been that was hard with, things were getting canceled and shoots were canceled. But I know what I've found is reaching out to people that you've done stuff, and also offering new opportunities. So in our case, we had a lot of online coursework that we had done in English, and that people also wanted to be able to I think produce in Spanish or whatever. I think it was Spanish. And so we'd actually produce some of that content for an online course in Spanish. And that's one of the things I've realized too, is that people, especially when it comes to business, if you said, hey, I do video for a business, that's a huge category. But all of a sudden, when you say, hey, well, we can help you take your content and make it applicable in another language and make it so that it connects with people, and we have these 5 levels of communication that you can do, you really stand out. So it's been like last year was definitely a tougher year, but at the same time, just reaching out, being willing to pivot, being able to get clarity. So just this week, I signed a client who lives in Senegal, West Africa, who wanted help with kind of the video strategy. But I think it was because I kind of had that focus down, that I was able to win that client. So that's been exciting for me, is being able to realize that even after, for me, it's been a 2-year shift of wanting to do some of the stuff, of just now some of the people are coming on and saying, yes, you have like a specific skill set. Let's focus in on that, and they're willing to go with it. But it has been a long process, and so I think that's the biggest thing. Is sometimes you just have to lower your overhead and kind of ride out the storm.
Yeah, that's good advice, because it would be easy to redo your website or start posting online to, a very specific niche, to try to market to a specific niche, to try that for 90 days. And then if it doesn't go well or you don't get, it's really easy to be like, okay, I'm moving on. Like, let me think of the next thing. But to pick something, stick with it, stay focused, and keep sticking with it. And I don't know what the exact time frame is for winning, but I think a couple of weeks, that's not long enough.
Yeah, I know too, because for me, I started doing things, and it's been about a 2-year journey.
Yeah.
And it's meant that in that time, I'm still kind of keeping that as my focus, but at the same time, there are other things I'm doing in the middle. But I think having that clarity of where you want to be in 2 to 3 years and aiming for that is what's going to be important, and realize that, there's going to be things through there that might be distractions, or that, hey, there's those projects that let you just pay the bills, and be okay with that, but have a sense of what you want to be doing more than anything else.
Yeah. Love it. Awesome, man.
And I think, and just refining your skills too. So, I mean, I had done, launched a podcast, made it to episode 50. But I kind of had I'd read early on that your first podcast is never your best. And I reached the point where, as a result of not defining my niche, where I had a podcast guest that just didn't resonate with. And I was like, well, if I can't clarify who I want to be working with, how am I going to attract the people who I actually want? And in one point too, he was like, well, who's your audience? And at one point my thought was like, well, my mom listens to the show, was what I was going on in my mind. But then I was like, if after 50 episodes, I haven't been able to clarify it, maybe I need to rethink things. And so that's where I went through a process of rethinking, but I learned so much along the way. Like, I learned how to produce a podcast. Now I know I'm getting ready to relaunch on how do you actually, who it is that I actually want to speak to in that niche, and to be able to track them. And then now I've learned how much I don't know about marketing a podcast, because producing one is a different skill than attracting audience and marketing it.
That is true. Yeah. And I have launched, this actually is my first podcast that I launched, but I did launch 2 other podcasts that were total failures. And I think I recorded a total of, between those 2 shows, 37 episodes. But the takeaways,
you learned a lot.
I did. I learned a ton. And when I launch, I'm not going to, at least not in the near future, do I plan on launching another podcast. But if and when I do, I will have a much better idea of what I shouldn't do. And really, it's about niching down and having a very specific audience that would actually search for your show, not like, marketing or business, right? But like really niche down. So Wesley, where can people check out your work, see what you got going on online, connect with you maybe beyond this?
Yeah. And so I do have 2 pages. We have intermotionmedia.com, which is more of like my production work. But then I also have wesleydean.co for more of the strategy work and, coaching. If you're looking to produce online content for another country, you can look at, I have a worksheet there, like a 5 steps where I break down ways of creating content for potential clients that actually the kind of levels of communication. And so obviously, like the first being just, add subtitles to something in another language, but you can do that, rev.com, anything like that. There are a number of services. Second would be, dub things. You can obviously dub it so people can look at see your face while listening to things. But then there's also, next steps such as, creating local examples of stuff in another culture for your audience, where so someone might pull up hey, I know you're, as an example, they know, this case, they might know, hey, you're from Michigan, so let me throw up a comment about a Michigan-Ohio State game, or, something like that, where I think that went, so we won't bring up that up.
Actually, I think I have.
And so there's those levels, but then at the same time, there's also, how do you work with someone who is a local point of contact and bring them on, so they're a validator, and you can connect with them as a point of contact. So you can get that info and check out more about my personal work. It's definitely been a struggle to differentiate me versus my company, but it's something I'm just continually working on.
Love it.
And also Instagram, Wesley PED on Instagram, or Facebook, LinkedIn as well.
Rock and roll, man. Well, this is really good, my friend. Thank you again. My apologies for it taking this long to get you on the show, but like I said, I'm old, and it's just what happens.
No. It was 2020 happened. I think we can. Any excuse can be thrown to 2020.
Awesome, brother. Well,
continue. It's been awesome having on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Much success, continued success for you. I'm excited to just to see what you continue to do, what you continue to create, what you are not afraid of trying. I think that's an inspiration to me, and I'm sure to others. So appreciate you, and we'll talk to you soon. Yeah, thank you, and thanks for all the advice over the last 2 years. It's been a blast. So helpful. Awesome. Have a great one. Hey, leave a comment below and tell me, what did you think of this episode? And do you agree that not all gear purchases are the smartest purchases? And I would love to know, what is the next thing that you're buying? What is the next thing that you're actually considering? How are you going to invest into your business? Thank you for hanging out with me today. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this episode, and you can also shoot me a message if there is a topic, a guest, or something that you would like me to create a future episode about. Let me know. And if you haven't joined our community on Facebook, this is a great place where there are amazing people, amazing videographers, filmmakers that are trying to make the world a better place, good human beings. Join that community. You can go to studiosherpas.com/Facebook, and it will redirect you to the Facebook group, and we'll link below too. So anyway, thank you so much, my friend. I will see you on the next episode. Back when I started my video company, stock footage, it used to be the worst. It was terrible quality, super cheesy shots, and really small selection, and it was really expensive. That is not the case with Storyblocks. They offer affordable subscription plans to their enormous library of stock footage, and with their unlimited access plan, you get access to the whole library, including HD and 4K footage. They've got After Effects and Premiere Pro templates, music, images, sound effects, and more. Seriously, there is tons. There have been so many projects where our team just needed one extra shot. Maybe the day after the shoot, the client was like, hey, this would have been a great thing to get. And we're like, ah. Or in post-production, they're like, hey, it'd be a really cool shot. We've saved our clients and ourselves a ton of money and headaches and heartaches. And we've saved a couple of projects that just needed that one special shot with our Storyblocks subscription. Head over to storyblocks.com/studiosherpas to help you create more video with their affordable subscriptions.